Oh, hi, and welcome to SABnessful, where I give my opinions that no one really cares about, but will give anyways. Today, I thought it'd be interesting to review a film in a genre I typically don't like, which in this case is romance. It's just not for me, but I thought it'd be a fun creative challenge to see what I do. And I chose the 2017 film Call Me By Your Name because the only thing I really knew about besides it being super popular was that it's centered around a gay romance between an adult and a minor. So I already knew going in that I'd have things to say, and here we are. Real quick though, if you're feeling peachy today, please make sure to caress that subscribe button to help my channel grow. And you can also, like and leave a comment that would help with my engagement and help with the algorithm, but you don't have to. I don't want to force anyone, but it'd be really nice if you did. I mean, I don't, you do you, you do you. And now said, let's legally get into Call Me By Your Name. Spoilers abound. The film takes place in 1983 and is set somewhere in northern Italy. It opens with our protagonist Elio, 17, watching his dad's new research assistant arrive from America, Oliver, 24, a graduate student staying with the family for 6 weeks with the goal of finishing a book project. Elio shows Oliver to his room, which is connected to Elio's room through a bathroom as well as a door leading into each other's rooms. Later that day, Elio shows him around town, and then we see them along with Elio's parents inside the study where Elio's dad, Mr. Perlman, goes over the origin of the word apricot. But Oliver has some things to say.
I may have to disagree with you there, Professor.
Huh?
I'm going to talk etymology, so just bear with me a second. You're right in the case of most Latin words do find their origins in Greek words. However, in the case of apricot, it's a little bit more of a complicated journey.
Ah, how so?
Later on, Oliver is playing volleyball while Elio fetches his friend some water, and Oliver comes over to grab the water from him. Oliver is a little standoffish and, well, rude. Anyways, Oliver very sensually touches and rubs Elio's shoulder, noting how tight he is, and even gets Marzia, Elio's girlfriend, to feel it as well. Later that day, while having dinner, Elio talks with his parents about how Oliver can be arrogant.
I don't think he's arrogant.
Just watch, this is how he'll say goodbye to us when the time comes. With his later.
After dinner, Elio plays, though reluctantly, piano for their guests and then goes to bed. The next morning, Oliver catches Elio in a compromising position and asks Elio if he wants to go swimming. They both get changed, which Elio sees Oliver doing, which I can't show here. There's actually a lot I can't show. They go swimming, Elio plays guitar, then he plays piano, and Oliver asks him to play what he was playing outside. And then they banter back and forth. And there's a lot of these type of scenes where nothing's really happening. It's just intimate moments between characters. There's not really a plot, it's more character driven. So moving forward, I'm just going to skim over a lot of these scenes and just go over the main points. That night, Elio, Marzia, and friends are hanging out, but Elio is occupied watching Oliver dancing with another girl. Eventually, Elio and Marzia join in on the dancing, and Elio kind of awkwardly dances with her, kind of awkwardly tries to dance with Oliver, and after the dance, Elio and Marzia go skinny dipping. And the next morning, Elio recounts what happened.
We almost had sex last night. Marcy and me.
Why didn't you?
I don't know.
Wow, just really going to be transparent with your dad there. You know what? Good for them. Good that they have an honest relationship. Anyways, Elio and Oliver join Mr. Perlman in uncovering a lost 1800 statue, and the next day, Elio goes snooping around Oliver's room. What you doing with his shorts there, Elio? Oh? Okay, well, that's now burned in my brain. Moving on. At one point, we get a scene where Elio's mother, Mrs. Perlman, reads a story with the subject being, is it better to speak or die when it comes to love? And Mr. Perlman tells Elio that he can always talk to them. The next day, Elio and Oliver go into town, and Elio confesses to Oliver he has feelings for him. Well, kind of. He does it in a very weird way.
Is there anything you don't know?
I know nothing, Oliver.
Well, you seem to know more than anybody else around here.
Well, if you only knew how little I know about the things that matter.
What things that matter?
You know what things.
No, I don't. I really don't. But somehow Oliver picks up what he's putting down, and he asks why Elio is telling him this, and he tells him that he thought he should know.
Because I wanted you to know.
Oh yeah, and because he wanted him to know.
Because I wanted you to know.
Okay, yeah, we get it.
Because I wanted you to know.
We get it!
Because I wanted you to know.
Say it one more time, Elio, I swear to God!
Because there's no one else I can say this to but you.
That's better. Anyways, they keep biking and at one point stop at some stranger's house and politely ask for a glass of water, and she obliges. I feel like America today could never be so kind. After this, Elio takes Oliver to his favorite spot.
I like the way you say things. I don't know why you're always putting yourself down, though.
So you won't, I guess?
Making things very difficult for me.
No. Not that hard to say. Please, for the love of God, say no. He won't. Oliver fingers Elio's mouth, they make out, and then Oliver says no. A little late there, buddy. Moving on, while eating with guests, Elio gets a nosebleed and Oliver checks on him. They bond. Later that day, Mrs. Perlman asks Elio if he likes Oliver, and she tells him that Oliver likes him. Wait, what? No, don't tell me their parents are okay with this. Anyways, for the next day or so, Oliver ghosts Elio, so he has no choice but to hang out with his girlfriend, and they do it. That night, Oliver gets agitated by not seeing him, so he slips Oliver a note. And the next morning, Elio finds a note from Oliver on his desk telling him he'll see him at midnight. This makes Elio anxiously waiting for midnight, so he hangs out with his girlfriend again to pass the time, all the while constantly checking the time. Later that day, they get a visit from Munir and Isaac, and Mr. Perlman wants Elio to wear the shirt they gifted him.
I can't put it on now. They've already met
Yes,
me. It'll
you
look
can.
like a put-up job. Papa, it'll look like a put-up job.
No misbehaving tonight. No laughing. You're too old not to accept people for who they are. What's wrong with them? What's wrong with them? You call them Sonny and Cher behind their back?
That's what Mom
Then you
calls
accept
them. That's
gifts
what
from
Mom
them?
calls-
The only person that reflects badly on is you. Is it because they're gay or because they're ridiculous?
That night, as he watches them leave, he notices Oliver on the balcony and he joins him. They then go back to Oliver's room, and this is where Oliver has sex with a minor. It's during this that we see how the film got its title.
Call me by your name and I'll call you by mine.
Elio.
I don't see how that's romantic. That would weird me out, to be honest, though obviously that's not the only thing that has. Anyways, that goes on for quite some time, and in the next scene, Oliver goes for a swim and Elio finds him.
Are you gonna hold what happened last night against me?
The fact that he knows, at least that's how I'm interpreting what he said, that he knows this is wrong irks me just a little bit more. Like, you know you shouldn't have, and yet you still did. Anyways, they all have breakfast together, and after Oliver leaves, Mrs. Perlman gives Elio the biggest side eye I've ever seen. Later on, Elio finds Oliver in town, and Oliver tells him how happy he was that they slept together. And Elio wants him to kiss him, but Oliver is too reluctant to do that in such a public setting. Elio then goes back home and grabs a peach and heads up to the attic where he and Marzia did the thing a day prior. And while there, he starts fingering the peach. Wow, just really going in there. God, the sound. He then takes out the pits and, what you doing with that peach there, Elio? No. Stop. Please don't. Anyways, Oliver finds him up in the attic with that freaking peach in the background. Oh, great, he sees it. Anyways, Elio doesn't like this, and overcome by shame, he starts crying, and Oliver tries to comfort him. That's night, they're on the balcony, and with Oliver leaving soon, Elio asks why he didn't give him a sign sooner.
When?
Remember when we were playing volleyball and I touched you just to show you that I liked you? The way you reacted made me feel like I'm molesting you.
Then maybe you should have just stayed away. The next day, Marzia confronts Elio about ghosting her, and she asks Elio if she's his girl. And Elio just shrugs. You deserve so much better, Marzia. We then see Elio's parents sunbathing, and Mr. Perlman mentions that Oliver is going to Bergamo for a couple of days and then flying back home to the States.
Oh, but what about Elio? I mean, maybe it could be nice for the two of them to get away for a couple of days, no?
Oh, God. Why? Just why? Anyways, the two of them go to Bergamo together for a few days before saying goodbye to each other at the train station, which greatly upsets Elio. Elio calls his mother asking to come get him, and she brings him home, but not before doing a quick errand where Marzia sees Elio in the car, and she goes over to him. By the way, quick context, Mrs. Perlman invited her and a friend over for dinner, where I assume she told her about Oliver's and Elio's relationship. Anyway, she tells Elio that she knows he's sad, that she's not mad, and wants to stay friends. Aw, you deserve so much better, Marzia. And quite frankly, Elio too. Ideally someone around his age because he's a minor. Later that day, Mr. Perlman has a talk with Elio. At least I think it's the same day. It's been really hard to tell in this film. Back to the conversation, he tells Elio how special his and Oliver's relationship was and how lucky they were to find each other. God, both parents. Elio tells him he thinks Oliver was better than him, but Mr. Perlman says he'd likely say the same thing about him, and he reassures Elio that he's always there to talk. He then tells Elio that he may have come close, but he never had what Elio and Oliver had, and that something always held him back. Essentially, Mr. Perlman is telling Elio that he is also gay, but never pursued a relationship with a man due to different reasons, most likely stigma. And the scene is a really beautiful one. The dialogue is top notch. But unfortunately, it's ruined for me because he keeps referring to Oliver's and Elio's relationship as special, and special is not the word I would use. Anyways, Elio asks if mom knows, and Mr. Perlman says he doesn't think so. Time passes and it's now winter. The phone rings and Elio picks it up to hear Oliver on the other side. Oliver says he has some news, and Elio jokingly asks if he's getting married. And Oliver says yes to a woman, just to clarify. Elio's parents pick up the phone and Oliver tells them the same thing, and they hang up to let Elio and Oliver talk. Elio tells Oliver his parents know about them, and Oliver tells Elio he's lucky and that his father would have carted him off to a correctional facility. Elio then whispers into the phone, Elio, 9 times, and Oliver responds by saying, Oliver, and that he remembers everything. The call ends and Elio goes over to the fireplace, with the final shot being of him crying while watching the flames. And that's Call Me By Your Name. Now onto my likes. And that's my likes. Now onto my dislikes. I'm kidding, I do have something I like. I love the setting of this film. The scenery is stunning, the villa they're staying in is beautiful, and the overall atmosphere is quite quaint. It really made me want to live in a small town in Italy in a historic villa. Oh, that'd be the dream. I can see how this can be seen as a cozy, lighthearted film, and I do understand the appeal in that regard. I don't like this film. I actually quite hated it, which I'll get into in a minute, but I can objectively say it is a good film. The dialogue is very poetic, the cinematography is great, and everything on a technical standpoint is well done. Morally, maybe not. Speaking of which, the main relationship. You can see the passion they have for each other. Yes. So I can understand why some people see the relationship as romantic, which is also kind of the problem, but I'm getting ahead of myself. And I did find the film refreshing in that typically when there's a gay relationship depicted, there's always someone who can't pursue it because they're too scared of what their family would think, and that's a main point of contention, which unfortunately of course is very common in the real world. And though there is some of that in the film, it's not a main point. Elio's parents are very supportive, and Elio is allowed to pursue a relationship with a man freely, which again likely adds to the appeal of the film. If anything, there's more about internal homophobia, which I found it interesting that that was explored. As for my favorite character, I really didn't like any of them. I'd like to say the parents because they are so supportive of Elio and give him space while making sure he knows he can always go to them, but they're a little too supportive. So I'm actually going to say Marzia, mostly because she had the right to be upset with Elio, and yet she shows grace and empathy and doesn't judge him one bit. A very admirable quality that I don't know if I would have had in her position. Plus, in my eyes, she didn't do anything wrong like encourage something problematic. So that's also why she's my favorite. And of course, Elio did nothing wrong when it came to his relationship with Oliver. He's a teenager, so of course he wouldn't quite understand why that relationship is problematic. But he's not my favorite character because I kind of just found him boring, and I don't forgive him for ruining my eyes with that peach scene. Now, at last, we come to my favorite part, my dislikes. I found this film so incredibly boring. I was bored shitless out of my mind. There's just so much nothing that's happening. And I'm all about slowing down the pace of the film and taking your time to develop the storylines and characters. But there was just so many scenes with the characters doing literally nothing. And yes, the dialogue is very poetic, but I never liked poetry. Now, in film, there's a technique of show not tell, and something you often get taught in screenwriting is to never have the characters literally say what they mean. Show it, but not tell it. But I felt like there were times where it was just annoying. Just fucking say what you mean, be straightforward. People don't talk in poems. And with some scenes, like when he says, I wanted you to know, so many freaking times, it just felt like the script was trying too hard to be poetic, and it took me out of the story. Now, I did say the dialogue is good, and it is. A big reason why I don't like this film is because it's just not for me. I don't enjoy romance films. I'm not really a slow burn type guy, at least to this film's degree, and I don't enjoy poetic dialogue. However, again, I can objectively look at the film and say it's good, just not for me. The other reason why I don't like this film, which I've been pretty blatant about, is that it centers around a relationship between an adult and a minor. I was truly disgusted at this and hated how it was framed as very romantic and special when it is actually very problematic. Granted, I can see why it's framed that way because the story is from Elio's perspective, and that's how he sees the relationship. A teenager falling in love with someone older than them is a tale as old as time, a problematic one, but not uncommon. But the problematic nature culture is never addressed in the film. In fact, all the characters, including the parents, are cool with it and see nothing wrong. Now, before people go typing away about how what Oliver did isn't illegal, I know that. Fair warning, I am about to go over some pretty serious topics such as sexual abuse, so if that is something that can be triggering to you, I highly recommend you skip to my How I Changed section. Going back to the not illegal thing, this is where age of consent comes into play, which, as defined by ageofconsent.net, is the legally defined age at which a person is deemed legally competent to consent to sexual activity. And in Italy, the age of consent is 14. Wild. That is insane to me, and I don't think I need to explain why. But given that in Italy, Oliver broke no laws. Even in the US, the age of consent varies state by state between the ages of 16 and 18, and what is considered as statutory rape also differs between state by state, which statutory rape, as defined by ageofconsent.net, is sexual contact with an individual who is below the age of consent. The age of consent in the state I live in is 16, so where I'm from, Oliver did nothing illegal. Also, the film takes place in 1983, and laws were likely different back then. But I'd argue that just because it isn't illegal, that doesn't make it okay. At the end of the day, Oliver is engaging in sexual activity with a minor, and in Italy, if you are under the age of 18, you are a minor. Now, that might not have been the case in 1983, but considering this film was made in 2017 and watched by a modern audience, I think it's fair to judge it through a modern lens. I do want to quickly mention the film is based off the novel of the same name, which was written in 2007. I've never read the book, and my opinions are solely based on what is represented in the film. I also do need to say that I am looking at this through an American perspective, and in America it is generally seen as socially unacceptable to have any sexual activity with a minor regardless of the legal age of consent. The film again takes place in Italy, and Elio and his family are French-Italian, so what is seen as socially acceptable in France and Italy likely differs than what is seen in the US. And I don't know enough about the culture in France and Italy to go into whether or not their relationship would be seen as socially acceptable. But because of that likely helps explain why Elio's parents were okay with this relationship, especially since it's 1983 and things were just seen differently back then. And I obviously have my own perspective, and I actually say that for me, even if Elio was 18 or 19, I would still say the relationship is concerning. At that age, there's just different levels of maturity. Now, I'm not saying that 17 or 18 or 19-year-olds can't be mature, but they just don't have a lot of life experience, and at that age, they are typically still trying to figure out their identity, and their brains biologically are still developing. Also, at that age, larger age gaps leads to different power imbalance dynamics. A 7-year age gap between two people in their 30s is a lot different than a 17-year-old and a 24-year-old. In my opinion, from an American perspective, the power imbalance is just too great, making this a problematic relationship. And I just want to say, I'm 24. I'm the same age as Oliver. And having that type of relationship with someone less than 21 to me is disgusting. Even though that's only a 4 to 5 year age gap, the maturity levels are just too different, leading to power imbalance. And when there's a power imbalance, it could lead to different problems like the potential for grooming. Now, the exact definition of grooming and what it exactly looks like can vary, but across all definitions, it is seen as a method of sexual abuse. According to RAINN, the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, grooming is seen as manipulative behaviors that the abuser uses to gain access to a potential victim, coerce them to agree to the abuse, and reduce the risk of being caught. While these tactics are used most often against younger kids, teens, and vulnerable adults are also at risk. Now, whether or not Oliver was intentionally trying to groom Elio can be debated. I would say I don't think Oliver had any ill intent when it came to his relationship with Elio, but that doesn't mean grooming can't still happen, and in my opinion, couldn't it still happen unintentionally? At that age, with that age gap, in my opinion, grooming can still happen. Elio at that age is more susceptible to that than he would be if, say, he was 24 and Oliver was 31. It again comes down to different levels of maturity, which could lead to an imbalance in power. That all said, I am not a psychologist, I am not a psychiatrist, and I am not an expert when it comes to these things. I am basing all of this on my own upbringing and knowledge and research I have done on the matter, and I apologize if I got anything factually wrong. I have linked some articles in my description that do a more in-depth look at the film and go over different grooming behaviors that Oliver exhibits. And I don't want people to think I am saying you are a terrible person if you like this film or if you like Elio's and Oliver's relationship. I'm not. It is, after all, a fictional relationship and not based on a true story. That said, I would hope people would objectively agree the age gap minor combo isn't great and understand the problematic nature of it. Long story short, I personally see the age differences as problematic and disgusting due to the different levels of maturity, and I don't think this relationship is the best representation of a queer relationship. There's already a stigma of gay men being pedophiles, and this film is romanticizing an adult gay man having sex with a minor. And with that said, I don't know how to cleanly transition into my next segment, so we're just going to hard cut into my how I changed section. I'm going to do things a little bit different in that the changes are going to be for my own enjoyment, not necessarily to improve the film like I normally do. I typically make changes that are in line with the creator's intent and I generally think would enhance what they're going for. But of course, anything I do is naturally tailored to my own taste. But with this film, the only thing I would change is the age gap. That's literally it, and everything else is fine. I still wouldn't like this film, not because it's bad, but because it's not for me. But changing the ages of the characters is easy and quite frankly boring, so I'm not going to just do that. What I basically do is what I was hoping they would do, which is addressing the problem of the relationship. So I will be keeping the ages the same, but will actually address why it's problematic. And I'm not doing a full rewrite like I do with some of my other videos because I'm not restructuring things, I'm just going over concepts of scenes. So I'd first start with cutting the film in half since there's just so many slow scenes of nothing, which I get why they're there, but to me they're boring, and I think I could easily cut half of it while keeping the main beats. I would specifically cut any scenes of Elio's parents encouraging Elio's relationship with Oliver, and I'm just going to have them not know about their relationship. But I will still have them believe Elio is gay and be supportive and let Elio know he can always talk to them. And I'll be stealing this scene where Mr. Perlin comes out to Elio and move that later on. You'll see. This now means that Oliver and Elio part ways halfway through the film, and Elio will still get a call from Oliver telling him he's engaged, ending that relationship. For the second half of the film, I think it'd be interesting, at least for me, to explore Elio as he gets older and starts dating more. At first, I'd have him be dating a lot of men, like a lot, and he does this to try to recreate what he has with Oliver. He even tries doing the whole call me by your name thing, which doesn't really go well with his partners. And with these relationships Elio is having, I still keep the central theme of discovery and figuring out what he wants. Which in the beginning of him dating, he wants what he had with Oliver, and no matter how many men he gets with, and no matter what he tries, he is not able to create that magic he felt with him, and he starts to sink into a depressive state. While this is going on, I'll have Elio's parents notice the quantity of men Elio is dating, which isn't inherently bad, but what concerns them is that Elio never seems happy in any of these relationships. I'll have scenes of them checking in on Elio, telling him he can talk to them, and at first they'll give him space to allow him to figure himself out, but at one point it's clear that they need to step in and do something, so Mr. Perlman has a talk with Elio. And this is where I reincorporate the scene where he comes out to Elio. And he does this for two main reasons. One, he does it to open up to Elio, hoping that he'd do the same, which I could just have the parents be super aggressive and try to get Elio to tell them what's wrong, but that's a little cliche and I didn't really want to do that. But two, he sees the self-destructive path Elio is going on, which is something he too experienced, which is one of the reasons why he never ended up with a man. I thought it'd be interesting to get more context as to why Mr. Perlman did not go down that path. Granted, a big reason would be because it wasn't socially accepted, but I also wanted to give more similarities between him and Elio. Because Mr. Perlman shares a similar experience to Elio, this makes Elio open up about his relationship with Oliver. I'd have Mr. Perlman not be happy to hear this, but I'd have him not show any judgment towards Elio. They then start discussing their relationship, and during this discussion, using his own experience, Mr. Perlman advises Elio that he needs to find the beauty in a new relationship, rather than try to recreate a previous one. I then have Elio say something about how he liked what he had, and then I'd have Mr. Perlman talk about his first relationship with a man, who he dated when he was a teenager where his partner was also much older. So once again, I'm mirroring experiences. Mr. Perlman talks about how exciting that relationship was because it was new and because he was young. But then he tells Elio he still hadn't quite discovered who he was yet, and because of that he didn't know what he wanted. And what he thought he wanted was just the wants of the other man that he received from that man's influence over him. So when the relationship ended, he held on to those false wants for quite some time, and it took him much longer to figure out what he actually was looking for. Essentially, I'm addressing the problematic nature of the relationship through Mr. Perlman. I thought having Mr. Perlman go through a similar relationship would be a nice way to address it, since he knows how that type of dynamic could be unhealthy, and he's able to share that with Elio. This then adds more depth to an already beautiful scene between them. And if my new conversation between them comes off as vague, it's because I'm trying to mirror how the dialogue is written in the film, where the characters never say what they actually mean. Because Mr. Perlman tells Elio about his past, this gets Elio to start trying to no longer create what he had. I then have him date a few more men, but not as high of a number, and we see through these relationships he starts to discovering what he really wants. Time passes, and as he gets older, he starts to realize that what he had with Oliver wasn't love, but rather lust. He realizes he had an infatuation with Oliver because it was the first time he was with a man, and he liked that someone who was older was into him, and he acknowledges that it wasn't the healthiest relationship. And then I'd have the film end with him sleeping with the guy that we saw him have a couple dates with. And this scene will mirror the scene where he slept with Oliver, showing us that he found the excitement of love again. And since we saw him discovering himself, we know this is love and not lust. And that's how I changed Call Me By Your Name. I really wanted to lean more into the psychology of Elio and have him be in a darker mindset than he was in the original story and see him come out of that. I always tend to make things darker with my changes. I'm kind of messed up, but not as messed up as Oliver. Anyways, feel free to let me know your thoughts on my opinions. I understand I had some pretty bold takes, and I understand that a lot of people might not agree with them. I just hope I was able to properly convey my thoughts in a respectful manner. That's all I have. Goodbye.